Chairwoman Berenger.
Present.
2 present.
All right. Seeing as, if I'm correct, this is all that's on the committee, correct?
Yes.
The official committee. All right. So we do not have a quorum? All right. Seeing as we don't have a quorum, but yet people have made the effort to be here today to hear Board Bill 151, I'm going to go ahead and let the sponsor of the bill, Alderman Young, go ahead and explain, and we can have discussion on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and member.
Oh, I apologize, Alderman Young. We have, if you would like to testify, we have sign-in sheets.
That's here.
Yes. Thank you. Proceed.
Board Bill 151 would place before the voters of the city, hopefully in April, a choice of making the Recorder of Deeds office an appointed office. The appointment would be made by the mayor. Currently, as you know, many of the offices are county offices, and therefore they are elected. However, most of these offices are providing administrative duties as opposed to any policy decisions. So while the Recorder of Deeds budget is like $2.7 million, it's really not under the administration of the city. It's not under the mayor. So the Recorder of Deeds has sole policy or sole discretion over how to spend that budget. And that is also in regard to her hiring policies, which are primarily a patronage system whereby she hires people that are referred to her or she's personally selected, rather than looking at skill levels or determining salaries based on experience or other skill-related matters. So what we're asking is, one of the things that we had talked about when we were talking about Prop P, which was to reduce the size of the board, Prop R, I was trying to figure out PRS, which one? Prop R, was that we wanted to add additional improvements, I suppose, or changes to our city as we went through the years. And this is the first one that's come up, to make this office an appointed position. And the alderwoman from the 15th at the time was in support of this, and she now holds the office of Recorder of Deeds, at least until January. So basically what this is doing is putting to the voters an opportunity to vote on whether or not to change that office and make it an administrative position with an appointment made by the mayor. It would take place after the term of the upcoming Recorder of Deeds, so 4 years from January 15, 2015. That would be in January of 2019. Whoever's mayor at that time could make that appointment. And that's all the bill is doing.
All right. I just want to make sure, I just want to clarify.
Sure.
So what this piece of legislation does is it puts it before the voters.
That's correct.
If they would like the Recorder of Deeds office to be an appointed office via the mayor.
That's correct. The mayor.
What ballot would it go on? Would it go on March 2015 or?
We're proposing that it would go on the April 2015 ballot.
And then currently, do you know how many jobs are in that office and how many of those jobs are patronage?
I only know what I read in the Riverfront Times recently, and I believe they said there were 40 jobs there. I don't think they indicated how many were patronage or if there were any that were not patronage.
Okay. And then if you are a patronage employee, and this is my question, are you or are you not protected as the civil servants are?
It's my understanding that they are not. If this office was appointed, what I would envision is that the employees of that office would be taken into the civil service system, which is the one that most city employees are under at this time. Therefore, there would be pay grades that would be determined for each of the job descriptions in that office. They would have job descriptions in the first place. They would have pay grades then that are determined based on what that job description says, and there would be protection again about hiring, firing, and all kinds of disciplinary actions that might be taken in regard to a position in this office. That is not the case at this point.
All right. Alderman Ogilvie.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alderman Rhodey just walked in, and you are senior alderman.
I
Do you
had
want...
the opportunity to visit with the alderwoman on Friday, so I think I've gotten most of my questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just sort of a question and a comment. So there's really two important changes. Obviously, elected versus appointed head of the office. But what would happen to the employees is sort of much what we did with a lot of police department employees once the city got local control. There was a process to determine how to categorize the existing positions in the office,
Right.
what their pay grade should be, and then the folks in the office, after that process was done, sort of had the rules and protections that the civil service and disciplinary procedures that the civil service that all employees in the civil service system have. So we've got the head of the office, which should be changing, and the classification of the employees within the office as well. So we've been making sort of two changes with this one vote.
That's correct. Just as personnel worked with the police department and the personnel department from the police department to make the determination about how to grade those categories and set it in a pay scale, they would do the same with the Recorder of Deeds employees.
And we sort of generally would regard positions within civil service as having typically more protections and for the employees and a level of consistency so that they're being paid a level that is appropriate for the work that's being done compared to other jobs across city government.
Yes, that's the case, as well as people who were in that same job would receive the same salaries, as opposed to my understanding, according to news articles I've seen, what's occurring down there now, where you might have two different people with the same title, but the pay is very different.
And if this is on the ballot in April, obviously it's a charter amendment, so 60% of voters in April would have to vote in the affirmative to make this law, correct?
Yes, just as they did on Prop R.
Right.
And it would be implemented then in 2019.
Right. And then I suppose last question. The state says counties need Recorder of Deeds offices because they provide sort of essential functions. But the state doesn't say whether the office should be an appointed office or an elected office. So it's really left to the discretion of the counties across the state, is how I understand it.
It's my understanding as well. I don't recall that the county of St. Louis County has an election for Recorder of Deeds, but I may be incorrect on that.
Right. So I think that, as far as I understand, there are counties in Missouri who have appointed Recorder of Deeds offices, and there are those that have elected Recorder of Deeds offices currently.
I really can't say. You know, my feeling is this is an office where people go for birth and death records, they go for real estate transactions. Those are jobs and tasks that are typically considered administrative. You know, I also understand that our office is very in the dark ages, so to speak, in regard to having that information available by computer, and that many of our records are in risk of being lost due to the poor filing and care that are given to them.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael Powers from President Louis Reed's office. Is he here now that Alderman Rhodey is here? If he showed up, if the president showed up, we'd have a quorum. He's not here? He's not here in the building? Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to see if any of the other aldermen, because we have other aldermen here as well. Did you all have any questions of the bill's sponsor? Oh, there's some chairs.
Do you mind? Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Alderman Cone.
First, I appreciate you having me added as a co-sponsor to this bill. I think that reforming our city government is something that's overly due. I think, some of the questions that I had already been answered, but I know that there's been discussion around an amendment to this bill. Are you able to share that at all?
There's been talk among ourselves about whether or not we should amend this bill as a committee so that any appointment made by a mayor in the future would be subject to approval by the Board of Aldermen.
Which, unfortunately, because we don't have a quorum, we're not able to introduce. But I think that that's a really important thing to bring up, that I think that, this bill, in its current state, I definitely support, but I think that there are some, conversations that are taking place amongst our colleagues and trying to take those folks' opinions into consideration. And, I think that with those amendments or amendment, we can certainly send this out to the voters, and I appreciate your leadership in that regard. Thank you.
As the chairman said, without a quorum, we can't take any actions at all. The clerk has drafted that amendment. However, we can't offer it now because there isn't a committee to vote on it.
Any other aldermen? All right. Yes, speakers. Can we go to the speakers, please? All right. Marie Ciselski. I apologize if I did that wrong. Okay.
So, and questions, I try and read pretty well, so I caught some of what the Alderwoman said, but not, much on it. My name is Marie Ciselski, and I've been an employee of the Recorder of Deeds for almost 20 years. I'm here for myself, not for the recorder, past or present. One of the problems that I see with this bill, aside from the long-term plan of reform for the city, I see it as a short-term legislative solution to a political problem. Many of the problems in the recorder's office are from a lack of input or oversight from other parties. 2004, there was an audit of the office from the state auditor that said you need to do X, Y, and Z. The recorder signed off on it, but no one followed up on it. So it was there, but nobody bothered to do anything about it. I have a problem. You would think, because I was one of the whistleblowers, that I would be thrilled about this because I was going to be protected. Civil service was going to protect me. I don't need anybody to protect me. I have protections in my job right now. I'm not an at-will employee, unlike the license collector in the Collector of Revenue's office. In fact, we have political protections that follow from a series of court cases out of Chicago. So that's the reason I can work in the recorder's office but still have my own political opinions, be a committee woman, and endorse anyone I want to. One of the things this bill does is it makes me a civil servant. It makes me a second-class citizen. I no longer have my First Amendment rights. That's a problem for me. Another issue with the bill and the direction of making this an appointed office is that there seems to be some confusion regarding the nature of the office. Yes, it's largely administrative. It is also a policy-making office. And I am surprised at the number of people that do not understand it is a policy-making office. We made our mark on marriage equality in this city because the recorder was a policy maker. Yes, the mayor needed her to make a policy decision to issue the license. She herself physically did not have to issue the license. Clerks issue the license. That was a policy decision. The decision years ago to pursue moving birth and death records from the health department to the recorder's office was a policy decision. There's an organization in Missouri called the Recorders Association of Missouri. It is a lobbying organization. Recorders, elected recorders, are in fact lobbyists on all sorts of issues relating to their office, but in particular in the city of St. Louis, because the recorder is also the vital records registrar, there are also birth and death records issues as well. There are also federal issues. Back before the mortgage crisis, the whole evolution of the mortgage electronic recording service, which enabled the mortgage crisis, was a very big deal with recorders across the country that could not get their county executives, or in our case, our mayors, attention to say, this is going to be a disaster. They're privatizing land records. Please do something. Over the years, there's been some problems with appointed recorders in Missouri. In Jackson County, it's a patronage office, which is what this bill would do. You're not creating just an appointed office. You're creating a patronage position, which is different from what St. Louis County has. St. Louis County, the Recorder of Deeds, is a civil service position under the appointed revenue director. In Jackson County, it's a patronage appointment. Some years ago, 10, 11 years ago, what happened was the county supervisor, I believe is what it's called in Jackson County, made a bad choice. And what happened was the entire Recorder of Deeds office walked out. They had a nuclear meltdown that lasted about 30 days, and then the recorders from across Missouri, the elected recorders, sent in teams to clean up the mess. In St. Louis County, there was a theft of like $500,000 from a cashier because the county did not have the same checks and balances with their cashier system as the elected recorders all did. They did not have an escrow account. There was this theft. Was anyone held accountable? Yes, a clerk ended up doing some jail time or being fined or something like that. But nobody in management was held accountable because in the county, the recorder is a civil service position, way down on the totem pole. Right now with the marriage equality issue, what's going on is in our office, we're preparing for it. We're dealing with the forms. We're going to be ready to go. St. Louis County, the recorder's office can't do anything because they don't know who their boss is going to be. That's a problem. You can't have recorders that have to wait in line to get an appointment to ask permission to do something, whether it's an amendment that's floated on the floor of the House during the legislative session, or something that the recorder needs, that needs to be an independent voice. Most states in the United States have counties. Not all of them, but most of them have counties. Most counties in the United States have elected recorders. They have a lot of other appointed positions, but the recorder is almost always an elected position, and that is to distance the recorder's office and land transactions from the executive. Let me give you an example of where that was important in the city of St. Louis. We previously had a situation under Mayor Clarence Harmon where there was a development office that was sending us deeds that had manifest errors, and our clerks reject them. That's what you do. You send them back and say, no, fix it. We're not going to record it till it's good. We got a call asking us if we could kindly just, record them because it was a big pile of deeds and they were in a hurry. And no, the recorder's office was able to turn down that request. That's one example. There are so many examples across the country of where the recorder as an independent voice is so important. And I think that there's all sorts of reforms that we could be doing in the city, including fixing civil service so that civil service employees have First Amendment rights. But this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't solve a problem other than a political problem, which is we've gone through a real mess in the recorder's office. You could put the recorder's office under the county charter. You could put their budget entirely under, the charter. There are all sorts of things to still keep it an independent voice separate from the executive office. That's all.
Okay. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? No, I do. Thank you. No. Please, Marie, I have questions for you. Oh, stay. I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. You say, as a civil servant, you wouldn't be protected, and as a patronage worker, you would be protected.
The irony is that as a patronage worker that is not an at-will employee, I have First Amendment rights. It's one of the reasons I was able to be a whistleblower in the office and not worry about repercussions, is because I knew I was within my rights. In civil service, you cannot be an officer for a political committee. You can't be a committee person. You can't, if your spouse runs for office, you can't be seen with them. You can put up a yard sign, you can belong to organizations, you can't be on a fundraising committee. You basically, other than ballot issues, you cannot be involved on candidates unless you're working from an organization standpoint and one of the, people handing out literature. You can't, I don't know how to,
okay.
It's amazing to me.
If I understand you correctly, you feel by being the patronage worker, that allows you to still dabble all you want in politics.
Exactly. And one of the things that the new recorder did was to make it perfectly clear that our jobs were not hinging on the politics. She did amend the policy manual. It happened like within the first 48 hours. She amended the policy manual to very clearly say our politics is our own. You will not be promoted or fired or anything like that. It was a very simple matter, and quite frankly, that is something very simple that you could probably slip into our pay bill right now. Is that language?
Okay. Now, the next thing and the only reason I bring that up is because what you triggered for me was that in the 16th Ward, the Democratic Club, we had to upgrade our bylaws because they hadn't been upgraded since 1989. Do you know it says in the 16th Ward Democratic Club bylaws that if you have a job, a patronage job in the city of St. Louis, you have to work on election day for the 16th Ward. That does not happen, and we're changing that because...
Exactly. Right. It's a bygone era. We're a hybrid patronage offices, just like in Chicago right now for the patronage offices. You are hired for who you know. You cannot be fired for your politics, however. There's a series of court cases that came out of Chicago which actually impacted... Circuit Clerk Bosley, when he came into the office, it triggered a court case based on those and was very successful.
I just want to make sure you knew that while in 1989 that may have been the case when they did the bylaws, we're removing that from the bylaws for 2014 in the 16th Ward Democratic Club.
There isn't, and other than the...
because technically, all the patronage workers that live in the 16th Ward are not working on Election Day.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense.
By and large, most of the employees in our office haven't worked the polls in years, except for one particular ward. There are people, but it's become... It's a bygone era. It's a bygone era is what it is.
All right. So, I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. We were trying to see if the president of the Board of Aldermen was able to make it, and... Okay, all right. So I apologize. So that's all I wanted to let you know, is that you triggered in me the fact that some of these things are archaic and need to be fixed because...
There have been instances in our office where employees, there's a new alderman, a new committee person or something like that was from a different side from the employee that basically, said, I don't want to have anything to do with this person, and then they were not off on the poll.
Right.
So that was it.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know a whole lot about patronage per se, But I think the reason they had that in the bylaws for our Democratic committee was because in the old days, they did give out jobs.
It is.
And we don't do that anymore.
And
that's what patronage is.
The license collector and the collector of revenues office are still at-will employees. So it's not just the politics. Technically speaking, if, you wear the wrong color hat, you can be canned. I mean, it's just, it's a different,
Right.
it's a different system.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, all of the offices should be under the county charter in some manner. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. Our government should be one, form. I have issues with civil service presently, and I have an issue with the recorder not being an independent voice and able to lobby. And if I could just add, one of the problems the Recorders Association is going to have is that the wise ones have all retired. There's a whole new crop of recorders, and there's a whole lot going on. But one of the things is Jackson County and St. Louis County are not voices in the recorders for the Recorders Association. So what we have the potential, if the recorder becomes an appointed office here in the city, is our urban voice is going to be the lady from Jefferson County, for crying out loud. There's going to be a really strong need over the next couple years to have a recorder that's active on a number of issues out there and can make decisions without asking the mayor's permission to do so. Independent of the mayor, based on experience in the office and the best advice from staff on some things, I have a really strong concern about the timing of this.
Okay, I appreciate your testimony, and we don't have a quorum, so we're just hearing about the bill today. But one thing I would like to know, because you've brought up the Missouri Association of Recorders, is that our assessor is also not elected. The assessor is not an elected position, but there's a Missouri Association of Assessors, and I'm going to assume you can still belong to the association even if you're not elected versus appointed. And I don't have that answer, and if you don't have it, that'd be great if you could just let me know.
You have the appointed and elected officers are technically under the law. You have to attend the annual training session to get your salary increase or something like that. There are a lot of assessors across the country that are in fact appointed or work for revenue departments. It is a different animal than recorders.
But they can still belong to the Missouri Association.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I just want to clarify that.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just they don't participate.
All right.
It's just kind of one of those, it's
Okay.
rural Missouri's running the show now. I mean,
Right.
it's and I have very, very strong feelings that the city needs to have a strong voice there, at least for the next couple of years, because it's going to be a tough go. They're already talking about fighting marriage equality when the court decision finally comes. So there are rural counties that probably aren't going to issue, or they're just not going to bother to change their certificates or something like that. So.
Right, but you could still belong to the association.
Yes.
If you're appointed. You could still serve on their executive committee if appointed. That would not bar you from not being active in the Missouri Association of Recorders, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's all I want.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your testimony.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next we have Jimmy Matthews, and I apologize, I should have said from the beginning, 5-minute testimony. Then if we have questions, it can go longer, but 5 minutes, please.
Wow, I'm glad you invoked that rule.
Well, we did get Marie to actually stop, but then we ask questions. So if anyone on the committee has a question for you, as myself, we can ask you questions, unless you don't want to answer the questions.
Thank you for the privilege of standing before you. I ran for the Recorder of Deeds office, and I was hoping that we could continue the process whereby office citywide will continue to be so, where people can participate in our political process. As you continue to system here, like you said, the assessor's office is appointed, and clerk's office is appointed, and several other offices, another office is appointed as well. I'm just wondering how we're going to continue to do this process and maintain a political base in the city. I can foresee that if we keep eroding our political base, which is Democratic Party, it seems to be the party of the city of St. Louis, and eventually I can see that this would not be a Democratic stronghold if we keep limiting the number of people elected to office, citywide and otherwise. We reduce the size of the board. All this seems to lead to one-man power base that's being created for the city of St. Louis. And the people that have been on the ground level, such as the committee people and the people that are in a process whereby they receive patronage jobs, that patronage system is being destroyed. And I'd like to ask of you, Madam Chairman, is that the goal is to destroy the patronage system in the city of St. Louis? That's a question I'd like to ask you. There's a goal in the mayors and the people who are going to be mayor, whoever's going to be mayor, is to destroy the political base of the city of St. Louis, whereby one person is determining the politics of the Democratic Party.
Well, I am not. This is not my bill.
No, I know
Board
it's
Bill
not, but I just want to hear your
and
view.
it's Alderwoman Phyllis Young's bill,
Yes.
and she has 1, 2, 3 sponsors.
Yes.
So if you would want them to,
No, I just want you to know your view on that particular question, and I'm quite sure if it has been thought of, I want you to know if you have thoughts concerning that particular process, the process and the road that we're going down, in terms of if you eliminate this position as elected position, I foresee that you'll be dealing with the collector's office, license collector's office in the future, sheriff office next, and also the collector of revenue. And that seems to be the way we're going. And I'm saying that if we're going to do it that way, stop piecemealing it. Just go and do it if you're going to do it, or let us not be confused as the way you are our Democratic leaders, elected officials. We're looking to you to have some insight as to what we want to have, how we're going to look in the future. Because what I foresee is that if we have one person elected to the office of mayor, appointing all the citywide currently elected positions, and as he does now, is that what we're trying to achieve overall, or is that something that we are not entertaining? With the Board of Aldermen being reduced to 14, I think, how many members of the Board of Aldermen are we reducing it to? 14? So, and so I'm seeing that people who don't have money to get elected won't be able to get elected unless they sell themselves out to the highest bidder in order to get money to run for office. Is that where we're leading and going to as a community, whereby politicians are putting themselves in a position where they have to raise money in order to get elected, rather than have people on the ground, such as patrons, workers, people in the ward, committee people? Or are we trying to eliminate the committee people from their position, where we don't need any committeemen, committeewomen, and those types of people in our political system? So if we're going to change the political organization's chart, we, the citizens and other participants in the political process, we need to know where you're going with this, or do we make that decision on our own? And so I'm saying that I do not agree with this process in terms of eliminating citywide offices, and also making aldermen's positions where it's a smaller number. I don't see how the mayor can run everything in the city, and he lacks expertise in everything. So if you're going to put someone in a position where you're going to administrate every department, and I enjoyed the thing the committee woman presented, some very pertinent information regarding the Office of Recorder of Deeds. I'm a real estate broker, and I work with the Recorder of Deeds office. If I had any political problems, the mayor appointee would, since I'm politically active and not in terms of in his campus, whatever, what kind of problems would I have with the office if I had to go to the mayor to get what I need from the office? So I don't like that type of arrangement where one person is making decisions for many of the offices that are in the city that we, the people, have to deal with. And if we're not politically connected or wired to people in those positions, we feel alienated because we're not selling ourselves out to that person at the top of the heap. And I don't like the idea of the Board of Aldermen is allowing the power of your office, your board, your legislative board office. It's not exercising the kind of power and seeing that. I like the idea of having the amendment, in terms of to the bill where you have some approval of that. But if the mayor controlling 51% of the aldermen, then I don't see how the mayor still would control whatever the Board of Aldermen do in terms of approving who's going to be the appointee. So so you have to watch the political points of that are possible to negate the power base, the sharing of power, and the distribution of power. So legislative bodies should make sure they have some power in place for these appointees. But if the mayor is controlling 51% of the aldermen, giving out these little Band-Aid things for your ward and all that, we need to become a real political balance of power in our government here in the city. So I argue that point, that this should be distributed and you should have as much power as the mayor. But when you go to the E&A, it's another issue. But I think we need to stop and not hurry up and do this. I think you should get some more opinions, because from what I heard from the person that come from the Recorder of Deeds office, it appears that some of our aldermen are not well aware of that office and how it functions. And I'd like to hear more about that and what was presented in terms of the associations, that you have a voice in the overall process nationally as well as statewide. I don't want to take up your time. I appreciate you giving me my 5 minutes, and may God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any comments? All right. Well, once again, we do not have quorum, so we heard the bill's sponsor and her testimony and some of our people who were opposed to it, and I appreciate everyone coming out, and I appreciate everyone putting in their time, and we'll see when we can hear the bill heard again. Thank you. Oh, I didn't see Phyllis. I couldn't see you. You're on the other side. Sorry. Did you want to say anything? I didn't know she was still here. I couldn't see you.